While Batman Arkham series developer Rocksteady Studios were busy working on 2015's Batman Arkham Knight for the 8th generation of video game consoles after their highly acclaimed sequel to Arkham Asylum, Batman Arkham City, released in 2011, Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment felt they needed to bridge the gap between games, and decided to pass the baton over to Warner Bros. Games Montreal to develop a prequel for the series, using the same assets found in Arkham City. What we got was Batman Arkham Origins, which hit store shelves in October of 2013. Like I said, it acted as a prequel to the series, set before the events of Arkham Asylum. Though on its surface it retreads over many of the same elements and gameplay mechanics of its predecessor, it did bring a lot of new ideas to the table, and its story is just as strong, if not more so, than some of the other games in the franchise. Arkham Origins might not be perfect, but it's still a great Batman game. In my opinion, it's one of the most underrated superhero titles out there. Arkham Origins takes place 5 years before the events of Arkham Asylum, and during the second year of Batman's crime-fighting career. It's Christmas Eve, and Gotham crime lord Roman Sionis, Black Mask, has put a bounty on Batman's head for $50 million. He has gathered 8 of the world's deadliest assassins to compete for it, and among those killers is the marksman Deadshot, the pyromaniac Firefly, the contortionist Copperhead, the martial artist Lady Shiva, the powerhouse Bane, the monstrous Killer Croc, the electrifying Electrocutioner, and the mercenary Deathstroke. On paper, this is a great way to kick things off, and right from the get-go, you're completely invested in this storyline, and what this game has to offer. Unfortunately, Arkham Origins suffers due to one fatal mistake. Despite the Joker dying at the end of Batman Arkham City, Warner Bros. Montreal just couldn't let him go. I know this is a prequel, and the character would be alive, but on this night, Christmas Eve, Batman has his first encounter with the Joker, and to be honest, for the most part, it's pretty well executed. The story contrasts the orderly and serious tone of Batman's way of thinking and crime fighting with the chaotic and extreme viewpoint of the Joker. It works really well, and we get a sense that both of them have completely altered the life of the other, almost in an instant. Seeing the beginnings of this love-hate relationship is interesting, and one of the strongest aspects this game has going for it. Batman and Joker are in many ways the same, two sides of the same coin. However, it does come at a cost. The compelling idea of a $50 million bounty on the Dark Knight's head is basically forgotten by the game's end, in favor of the Batman-Joker story. To make matters even worse, many of the supervillains featured in the game are thrown on the back burner, with the Joker taking most of the spotlight. Characters like Shiva, Deadshot, and Black Mask are confined to short, anticlimactic, and unimpressive side missions. Black Mask, who was the main reason I picked up this game in the first place, was the most disappointing because in my eyes, he should have been the game's primary antagonist. It's what it all seemed to be aiming towards at the beginning. Instead, it is revealed that Black Mask had been the Joker the entire time, and the real Roman Sionis was simply kidnapped by him before later escaping, which results in the aforementioned side mission. The fact that they set up one of Batman's rogues and turn him into another shows you how little faith they had in the strength and potential of the Black Mask character. He's not one of Batman's strongest villains by any means, but when done right, he can be quite compelling. Here it's a bit of a joke, and I sometimes hate how Warner Bros. Favors the Joker and puts him in everything. Yes, he's a great villain, but too much of anything can become sickening after a while. Again, the strong narrative explaining the origins of the Batman-Joker relationship is good. It gives the Joker a reason to be in this game. But in terms of explaining how Batman and the Joker are soulmates in many ways, that's honestly something done better in Arkham Knight than it is in Arkham Origins. It's much more effective in the final moments of that game than it is in the entirety of this one. In Arkham Origins, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill were replaced as Batman and the Joker respectively, seeing as this is a prequel story, and our new voice actors are Roger Craig Smith playing the Dark Knight and Troy Baker playing the Clown Prince of Crime. Roger Craig Smith does a great job breathing life into his own version of Batman. which seems to take elements from both Kevin Conroy's from the previous two Batman games, as well as Christian Bale's from the Dark Knight trilogy of films. Despite taking inspiration from the two, Roger Craig Smith still manages to bring a level of originality to it, which is admirable, and makes the whole gameplay experience new and interesting in that sense. Everyone tends to think Troy Baker is an amazing Joker, and I'd have to say I don't really believe that. He doesn't portray his own version of the character, and instead, simply copies the one done by Mark Hamill, which is unfortunate. Is it bad? Of course not, but I would have much rather preferred that he come up with his own interpretation and not just impersonate another, regardless of whether or not this is a prequel set within the same Arkham universe. Is it a good impersonation? Yes. But is Troy Baker a good Joker? Not really. He's a good Mark Hamill Joker. Because Arkham Origins' depiction of this character was simply an impersonation, it was a bit of a wasted opportunity in my opinion. Quite disappointing. Though Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill are absent from this game, Warner Bros. Montreal was able to bring in the character of Detective Harvey Bullock, who had yet to debut in the Arkham franchise, with Robert Costanzo reprising his role from Batman the Animated Series. He doesn't factor into the story in any way, and is sort of just there, but his inclusion was welcoming. I thought it was cool.
Where'd he go? Huh? The Bat. The partner. My partner? Who else would jump off a building to save your sorry ass? You know, officer.
I was wondering the same thing myself.
Like I mentioned at the start of this video, Arkham Origins was created using assets from Arkham City, the quickest and cheapest way to make a bridging game within a series. The open world of Gotham consists of the reused sections of Park Row, the Bowery, Wonder Tower, and Amusement Mile from Arkham City, just with new textures and skins over top. This time around though, the game world is almost twice as big as the one found in Arkham City, with the original map from that game making up North Gotham, and the inclusion of a newer and glitzier South Gotham added to the mix, connected by a massive bridge. South Gotham consists of Coventry, Burnley, and my personal favorite, the Diamond District, which is full of high-rise buildings, flashy lights, and neon colors. It's like I'm in Batman Forever. Arkham Origins Gotham is supposedly twice as big as Arkham City's, but I think that's debatable. I think City has more indoor sequences than Origins does, and even if it doesn't, the level of detail in Arkham City far surpasses the level of detail found in Arkham Origins. If the environment's graphics aren't as good, of course you can pack more into this game. That's a no-brainer. Despite the Gotham in Arkham Origins being bigger, it is one of the most eerie and lifeless open worlds I have ever seen in a video game, and I think the Christmas Eve motif doesn't do it any favors. Every Arkham game released so far has had a game world devoid of any and all civilian life. But, unlike Arkham City and Arkham Knight, that have legitimate reasons behind their absence that you never think twice about, here it's kind of ridiculous. The beginning of the game mentions that there has been a severe weather warning, and that Gotham citizens have been advised to stay indoors. That's cool and all, but it's not like a citywide evacuation or anything. Don't you think there would be a few strays out there, getting last-minute Christmas shopping done, or hell, driving home to be with their families for Christmas? Some people work on Christmas Eve, and I don't think Gotham would be an exception. All in all, it's a pretty weak explanation. I did enjoy the inclusion of the Batcave though, that you could travel to at any time to train in combat challenges in order to hone your skills and get a few extra experience points you could use to upgrade your arsenal. You could also talk to Alfred and discuss various events that have transpired as you play, and even look at some cool Easter eggs like a section of the prototype Batmobile later featured in Arkham Asylum, the line launcher, and even a crime board showing you various trails Batman has been following, like Calendar Man and the mysterious Red Hood. Having the Batcave explorable here was something I had wanted in the Arkham games since day one, and I was happy Warner Bros. Montreal delivered on it. Much like the game environment, the combat system is stripped right out of Arkham City with a few minor deviations. Seeing as this game takes place earlier in Batman's crime-fighting career, a couple of the animations are more sluggish-like, with some of the ground takedowns, for example, that make Batman seem a bit more inexperienced than in previous games. You still have your cape stuns, quick-fire batarangs, and explosive gel, takedowns, beatdowns, and bat swarm abilities. All that hasn't changed. But there are some cool new additions like the martial artist enemy type that can counter your strikes, counter your counters, and sometimes needs to be blocked with a double button press, which can get tricky if you're surrounded by them. There are also brutes that take multiple strikes to defeat, and even armored brutes that require a takedown first before a beatdown. Unfortunately, once you acquire the shock gloves from the electrocutioner about halfway through the game, the combat in Arkham Origins becomes broken. Why? Because once these babies are fully upgraded, all it takes is a few takedowns to charge them up, and once activated you can punch through shields, armor, tasers, everything. It essentially becomes a win button, and eliminates any and all strategy. I'd like to say that you could just not use them, but that's easier said than done. Once the game prompts you to activate them, it can be hard to resist, like a drug addiction. You want Batman to go God of War mode on all their asses. Despite the added-in brutes, martial artists, and other enemy types from previous games, the combat system is very unbalanced due to the shock gloves. Apparently, early on in the game's development, there was going to be a snowstorm feature which would cause complete whiteouts during some combat encounters, thus limiting the player's visibility. Sadly, it was removed because it caused the game to slow down too much. If it would have been added in, it may have helped balance the power of the shock gloves a little bit more, though maybe the shock gloves were a quick last-minute replacement for the whiteout system, so who knows. The Predator encounters aren't much better because you get another gadget from Deathstroke that is new to the series called the Remote Claw, and this one you receive much earlier in the game. Much like the shock gloves, it can be a lot of fun at first, shooting cables between vantage points to walk along them and perform stealth takedowns from above. You can also tether two enemies together, which stuns them, allowing you to close in for a finishing strike. Once the Remote Claw is fully upgraded though with heavy real ammo, you can instantly incapacitate 3 enemies in any Predator room by simply firing the Remote Claw at them, which hurls them up towards the nearest vantage point. Most times you don't even have to move all that much, so basically strike 3 off any Predator encounter automatically. For a game that's supposed to take place early in Batman's crime-fighting career, having him a little wet around the ears, he seems to be the most overpowered in Arkham Origins compared to all the other installments, which doesn't make much sense. Yeah, gamers want more features every time there is a new game released, I get that, but here, it didn't feel like many of the additions were necessary. They felt lazy and obviously there wasn't that much thought put into them. Okay, so that's enough on the gameplay. Let's talk more about the side missions and cast of characters featured in this game. We already know about the Joker and his hijacking of Arkham Origins' story. That wasn't the most ideal. But many of the lesser-known villains are given their dues, like Firefly and Copperhead for instance, and that's nice to see. This depiction of Bane is one of the best in my opinion too, and gives The Dark Knight Rises a run for its money. He even goes to Wayne Manor, breaks into the Batcave, and seemingly kills Alfred. Brutal stuff. Mad Hatter was a character I'm glad made his return after debuting in Arkham City, and I think his side mission here was more enjoyable than his first. You go to save a girl named Alice who has been kidnapped by him, and after being drugged in the hopes of Mad Hatter obtaining your cowl, you make your way through his twisted version of Wonderland. You battle goons with rabbit masks, break through giant playing cards, and climb to the top of a clock tower. It's one of the most visually stimulating parts of the game, that's for sure. One of my favorite Batman villains, the criminally underrated Anarchy, causes some ruckus in this game too. It's a travesty how underused he is, however, appearing right after you finish at the Penguin's docked final offer ocean liner, and makes his exit shortly after. His side mission involves stopping 3 bombs planted throughout the city, and then a final confrontation with him at the courthouse, but it can all be finished within a very short time span, which undermines his threat level in my opinion. Though Anarchy has little time awarded to him, they do manage to pack in as much philosophical ideology as they can related to anarchism. He seeks to work with Batman at first, feeling they can fix Gotham together, but Batman refuses, and the misguided naive Anarchy turns on him. Other antagonists you face are members of the GCPD themselves, which is an interesting direction for this game to take and helps it stand out from the other Arkham installments, showing the tension and uneasy relationship between the independent vigilante that is Batman and the city's trusted police officers was a refreshing idea. Both mentalities are justified and clash with another at various points throughout the game. We even get introduced to a young Barbara Gordon who would later become Batgirl and then Oracle in the series, who helps him locate the database, and James Gordon's plan is to capture the Batman as quick as possible so the assassin's bounty doesn't put innocent lives in danger. We have all three characterizations effectively displayed here and understand why each of them are doing what they do. On top of that, we have an officer named Brandon who is corrupt and has infected the majority of the department with his greedy and selfish ways. Behind Gordon's back, he assembles a team to track down Batman and kill him, so they can take the $50 million themselves and retire early, as he puts it. The tension between Batman, James Gordon, and the rest of the GCPD is one of the stronger elements of Arkham Origins' story. Gordon's character is much more fleshed out in this game than in any of the others, where he seems to just be in the background. I enjoy the inclusion of the Brandon character as well, but I feel he should have played a larger role in the narrative. He only pops up a few times, and they aren't that important in the grander scheme of things. Much like the other Arkham games, Arkham Origins implements the Riddler, who in this case Edward Nashton, known as Enigma. He plans on collecting personal information from the citizens of Gotham and use it as blackmail against them, for ransom, robbery, you name it. Honestly, it's a logical direction for this character early on in his criminal career. I just wish it had been done more effectively. The Enigma challenges in Arkham Origins consist of collecting data packs that replace the Riddler trophies in Arkham Asylum and City, destroying communication relays which replace the security cameras, and hacking relay towers so you can fast travel to various points throughout the city with your Batwing. Once they are all completed, you can hack into Enigma's hideout and collect the very first Riddler trophy, signifying his transformation into the iconic supervillain, which is cool. However, the challenges here are extremely repetitive and tedious. They get old really quick. Unlike Arkham City and even Arkham Asylum that have a combination of riddles you need to scan in the environment and trophies you need to collect, here it's just collecting, nothing more, nothing less. I know he isn't the Riddler yet, so riddles would technically be out of the question, but that means there isn't enough variety with what you're doing, and the game doesn't really promote the idea of exploring the environment, allowing you to find Easter eggs, which eliminates a lot of the fun. On top of that, the gadget puzzles you solve in order to collect the data packs are lazy. Many of them repeat several times throughout the city, and apart from the rare one which poses somewhat of a challenge, the majority are simple and don't use any effort to figure out. When you have to backtrack to previous parts of the game to collect missed ones, it isn't as rewarding as the other games because you know you could have easily acquired it before. It's all just annoying busy work. I was not a fan. My most hated part of all of this, though, was the wooden plank barriers. In Arkham City, you could smash them by gliding into them or punching them, but here, you have to use explosive gel, which can get really frustrating for people who are very familiar with the series like myself. It's annoying to have to constantly switch to the explosive gel gadget and spray some down, when all you should have to do is punch it once. It makes collecting everything take longer, and is a quick way for the game developers to pad everything out. If they didn't want me to instinctively try to punch it and frustrate myself, then make the wall look like all the other walls that need explosive gel. Why trick me like that? Fucking assholes. Okay, so going back to another thing I genuinely enjoy about Batman Arkham Origins, we have the detective aspect and crime scenes. I think this game shifts focus onto this element of Batman more so than all the rest, which is one of its more admirable qualities. At several points throughout the story, you need to find evidence, piece together clues, and analyze crime scenes in order to advance. The only downside is that it uses the mechanic we would be introduced to in the following game, Arkham Knight, which at the time we didn't know about, and in Arkham Origins it has been watered down. You do locate evidence in the crime scenes by fast-forwarding or rewinding the events that transpired, but once you reach the correct point on the timeline, the game points out what you need to find with a bright red triangle, defeating the purpose of doing all of it in the first place. Despite this flaw, I still think the game puts in more of an effort to show you the detective side of Batman's character. There are even crime scenes that activate all over the city as sort of side missions that get you to solve each murder and track down and interrogate the one responsible. It makes you really feel like the Dark Knight, it's something he would do. The final murder even shares similarities with the death of Batman's parents, taking place in Crime Alley, which makes it even more personal.
What do you think you're doing? Do you know who I am?
I know exactly who you are. You didn't do it for money. You didn't even do it for love.
You're choking me. I can't breathe.
Not out of jealousy, not out of anger. You did it because you're a small, selfish, malicious...
Sir, is everything all right? Your vital signs are rather erratic.
What the hell's wrong with you?
There are also plaques you can find all over the city on some of Gotham's oldest landmarks that unlock pieces of Cyrus Pinckney's journal, the architect who designed and constructed many of the landmarks found within Gotham during the 1800s. It's a cool way of diving into the rich history of the city, and as you complete the journal and collect all the pages, you slowly learn of the dark origins of Gotham, the betrayal amongst its founders, and even solve the murder of Cyrus Pinckney himself, Gotham's oldest cold case. It makes you feel like a true detective, because the game doesn't tell you where these plaques are in any way, aside from glowing blue and detective vision, and the entire side mission isn't on the page with the other side missions, it's completely missable. You just have to know the layout of the city and become familiar with the locations of the oldest buildings, typically ones featured in Arkham City. It's not a spectacular addition to the game by any means, but like I said, it adds to the whole feeling of being a detective, which is much appreciated. You even end up in Cyrus Pinckney's crypt, and it's honestly a bit spooky. Now I have yet to talk about the boss battles in this game, and let me tell you, collectively they are some of the best in the franchise. They have a nice variety to them and target different gameplay combinations, more so than previous games in my opinion. One of the best is Deathstroke's from early in the story, and it's one of the most physical encounters Batman has had in the entire series. There are so many strikes and blocks going on, getting harder and harder as the fight continues, which makes for an intense sequence. With that said, it has nothing on the Mr. Freeze battle in Arkham City, which is still the pinnacle achievement of the series boss-wise. I also find the fight with Deathstroke to be less and less epic with each new playthrough, because the animations, though awesome, do repeat themselves over and over again. It's also kind of disappointing compared to what we saw in some of the early trailers for the game. I think this battle should have taken place outside, or at the very least, much later in the game. Once Deathstroke is beaten, he kind of disappears from the story. Another great boss battle in Arkham Origins is the one with Copperhead, which has you poisoned seeing duplicates of her. It takes several elements from the Ra's al Ghul fight from Arkham City, but I do still enjoy it, and it's definitely one of the more challenging boss battles, especially on harder difficulties. The Firefly encounter on Gotham's Pioneer Bridge, near the end of the game, is very satisfying too. It's paced out in several sections, mixing gameplay and cinematics, and makes use of Batman's quick-fire grapnel gun and glue grenades, which is cool. The rooftop encounter with Bane is also a highlight, far surpassing the boss fight in Arkham Asylum. This one has a level of intensity the original game could only dream of, and takes inspiration from the Nightfall story arc. However, the later battle with him at Blackgate, where you are given unlimited charge on the shock gloves, while epic and challenging, is sort of underwhelming because you're too overpowered. And then, the sequence with the TN1 Bane at the end is an anticlimactic game of cat and mouse with a dumb explanation as to why he is the way he is in Arkham Asylum. We'll get to that in a bit, just you wait. Up until now, I have more or less pulled a lot of my punches with Arkham Origins, because despite its flaws, it's still a very engaging and enjoyable Batman experience. With that said, there is something that has held this game down from being great when it was released, and unfortunately still rears its ugly head today. There are countless bugs and glitches that range from minor to game-breaking, which usually result in me having to reset the console at least once each time I play through the story, due to the game freezing or the countless times I have to restart a checkpoint because I'm unable to interrogate someone, annoying stuff like that. The fast travel option, which allows you to bypass the long and repetitive bridge in the middle of the map, is a nice feature, but even that needs to be used sporadically because sometimes the audio for the cutscene will cut out and occasionally it will just show the Batwing and refuse to load, forcing me to reset the game again too. Usually, I don't really care about this sort of thing in games, it happens. They consist of a lot of elements and glitches are bound to occur from time to time, especially if you are playing it hours on end and stressing the console, causing it to heat up and stuff like that. but here, it's a bit ridiculous and happens far too frequently. When I have to restart the game or reset my console several times just to play it casually whenever I find the time to play, it can become a pain. I don't have these problems with the other Arkham titles that run like water. Arkham Origins has a lot of frame rate issues too, and sometimes it's so incredibly slow that it ruins the flow of gliding or combat, causing you to fall or get hit, which is really frustrating. I hate when you are punished because of a game's performance, and not because of your skill level. It's unfair. I think the biggest culprit of all this, though, was the fact that Arkham Origins featured a pointless multiplayer mode. I myself am not a fan of online multiplayer because I think it embodies the very worst aspect of the video game industry, how short the lifespans are for games as well as the consoles. Once an online server gets shut down, a game that relies heavily on online modes, some even have it make up their entire games, now become nothing more than paperweights. Even if you buy a digital copy of a game, all the time that went into playing it and money spent on DLC becomes a waste. Not to mention that game developers have the ability to alter a game with a simple patch. Who's to say that what you bought will stay that way? It's not up to you. I prefer games that offer single-player experiences and ones that I know I can pop in and play years down the road. Much like movies that I enjoy watching decades after they are released, I want my games to reflect that too. If the team at Warner Bros. Montreal focused all their energy on Arkham Origins' single-player experience instead of its multiplayer, then maybe a lot of these bugs and glitches would have been addressed. They would have had the time and manpower for it. They spent all those resources making a multiplayer mode. For what? A few years of fun? Something that has since been closed down and will certainly become a forgotten relic of the past? It's pointless. The multiplayer wasn't even that fun, and the Predator gameplay and third-person shooting didn't mesh with each other that well. This type of game, these Batman games, don't work like this. Some people have fond memories of it, but I thought it was shit, to be honest. Anyways, let's wrap this up. Batman Arkham Origins may be the black sheep of the Arkham franchise, but in no way is it necessarily a bad game. I think its strongest elements are those discussing the relationship between Batman and the Joker, Bruce Wayne and Alfred, and the Dark Knight's vigilantism compared to the law and order of the Gotham City Police Department. Its focus on Batman's detective skills was something the other games in the series were lacking at the time, and I enjoyed the way you could solve crimes and catch those responsible despite its simplistic nature. Because Arkham Origins' story focuses on the early days of Batman's crime-fighting career and his introduction to many of the supervillains he would face here on out through the $50 million bounty placed on his head, I find it to be a lot more personal than the stories featured in the other games that favor larger threats, targeting all of Gotham or sometimes the rest of the world. Here, it's all directly targeted at Batman, for the most part, and it's up to him to stop them and learn from his own weaknesses and past mistakes. I don't think it's the best storyline in the Arkham series, but it's definitely up there when you take all of that into account. I find a lot of the inconsistencies with the other Arkham games and how Arkham Origins sets up the events of Arkham Asylum to be somewhat lazy, like how Bane's memory is erased due to the instability of his TN1 drug, the inclusion of the stupid glue grenade that replaces Mr. Freeze's ice grenade from Arkham City, just so they could copy that gameplay feature. Man, I hate this fucking thing. So dumb. That Batman is able to grapnel boost, despite that gadget being a prototype in Arkham City, and it wouldn't exist at this point in time, and the fact that Batman simply refused to use the remote claw and shock gloves again, despite their overpowered nature. Why wouldn't you bring those with you in future battles? I can see the remote claw being the early inspiration for the line launcher, but still, build the shock gloves into every batsuit from here on out if they worked so well. Doesn't that make sense? From what I've heard, Warner Bros. Games Montreal wasn't communicating that well with Rocksteady during this game's development, so I guess inconsistencies were bound to happen. They weren't really on the same page with everything, and it's kind of a shame really. Yeah, Arkham Origins still has a lot of bugs, glitches, and performance issues, but it isn't enough for me to completely bury it. Arkham Origins is still an Arkham game through and through, and any fan of the series can find something to love about it, I guarantee it. There have been rumors and fan requests about this game getting a remaster on the current generation of consoles, but honestly, I know why it wasn't featured in the 2016 Return to Arkham re-release. Not only was this an Arkham game not made by Rocksteady that doesn't flow very well into the continuity of their games, but the developer Virtuous would have had a lot of work on their hands. Not only would they have to remaster the graphics, but fix all the performance issues the previous developer threw under the rug. Yeah, it was disappointing that Arkham Origins never got the polish it needed, but at the same time, can you blame them? It probably would have cost Warner Brothers more money than usual. It'd have to be completely restructured, and I don't know how well Origins sold to begin with. Would it even be worth it in the end? I don't know. This has been NerdGasm. If you enjoyed the video and want to help support me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and bell icon to be notified of all future content I release. Also, if you want to have a say in which superhero game I review next, head on over to patreon.com and check out the various rewards I've got over there. As always, I will see you in the next one. Take care and stay nerdy.
Anyone for assistance.
They need you. No. They need us.